have the pleasure of introducing Bill Moyer, but before I do, I want to say a few words about this particular webinar. As I mentioned, we have done 36 other webinars, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them have been about one aspect or another of the military-industrial complex. Before I go further, are we recording now? Are we live streaming? Brian, are we good to go on that? Not hearing from you, Brian.
We are good to go.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry I didn't notice or not.
No problem, no problem.
Okay, good. So anyway, now that we know that, let me say something about this particular webinar. As you know, the last webinar, some of you may know, the last webinar was about activism, wasn't about particular aspect of the military-industrial complex, but activism against it. And we've had some webinars about conversion of the war economy to, an economy that addresses the climate emergency and so forth. Well, this one's in that vein as well. It's not about particular aspects of the military-industrial complex, but it's about what if we divested from the war industry and we invested in the common good, workers and communities and the environment. So I'm very happy about that. Bill Moyer is our presenter, and some of you may know of him. He was a co-founder, I should say, of the Backbone campaign, which was in 2003, with some friends from an artist affinity group. He's now the executive director of that group. He's an activist, an artist, and musician. If you don't know Backbone campaign, may find the website and put it in there for you. I've relied on Backbone campaign for some of my activism here in Asheville, North Carolina. They have a variety of strategies. They help you think through things. They have kits of materials they supply and give you advice. Very good resource person for organization for activism. Anyway, Bill's involvement with social change stretches back to the 80s, he says, when he was a student. He was deeply involved in the anti-nuke movement and the anti-interventionist movement. After a few years of studying political science and American philosophy at Seattle University, Bill went to Big Mountain to assist Diné elders refusing to relocate off their traditional land. He attended the Institute of Social Ecology, briefly lived on an organic vegetable farm in Vermont. Bill, he now lives in Seattle, Washington, and has emerged as a leader in the theory and practice of what's called Artful Activism. He designs and produces creative political actions, provides trainings in grand strategy and creative tactics around the country, currently focused on something they call Solutionary Rail. I know he's going to talk about that in this presentation. It's a campaign to put rail infrastructure in service of public goods and fundamentally in service of building common cause amongst unlikely allies for a positive populist vision for the future. So having said all that, please welcome Bill Moyer. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to express how grateful I am for this opportunity and humbled I am to be asked to do this. I know that that you all reflect the very best of our movements of movements. And how's my audio and video coming through? It looks a little choppy on my end.
We think fine.
Is it okay, Ken?
I hear you all right. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So, I think a lot of us have been taken aback. It felt like we were making progress over the years, that progressive populism was capturing the imaginations of the American public. And, we got to the Obama administration and people were all for change we could believe in. And then we didn't quite get change we could believe in. And then there was like the rise of the Bernie campaign, and seemed like folks were getting excited about that. But then the Democratic Party wouldn't allow that progressive populism to take front and center in its program. And 2020, we saw that again. And then we hit that pandemic, and there was just unanticipated turmoil and things that folks could never really imagine, circumstances that everybody was flailing to deal with, and not so gracefully a lot of the time. And meanwhile, we had I should say that at the start of the first Trump administration, I would say we had both the emergence of the very best of populism and the very worst, sort of simultaneously, with Trump's xenophobia contrasting with the Dakota Access Pipeline fight at Standing Rock. So the coming out of the pandemic, we're in turmoil, and instead of offering and celebrating the progressive populism where that we've taken care of people when things are rough, and we have a Green New Deal, we got a very competent government, but the thirst and hunger for change had not left the population, and the Biden administration in no way sort of satisfied that. So it brings us to a moment where of transition. I've been listening to some of Gary Gerstle's presentations recently, as an historian who talks about political periods, and having the New Deal period, and then having the Cold War period, and then having the neoliberal period, and now that we're in a transition to something that I think he would characterize as a populist period, but it's yet undefined. So in 2016, the Democrats, their response to Trump was to take on the mantle of a resistance, to be the resistance. And even though a lot of us who have had to interact with the Democratic Party know that they are not the bastions carrying the torch, right? They are not the vanguard of resistance, it's because we've had to be that across Democrat and Republican administrations for generations. So, but at this moment, when the competence and of the Biden administration did not deliver the change that people desired, the sense it did not satisfy the deep sense of loss, of alienation from place, from community, from a sense of meaningful work, from the land that we live on, that we did not, the Biden administration, that competence did not heal that. And so there is grievance that we all feel for a world that, we all believe that another world is possible. And so we are in a moment where we have to grapple with the fact that so many people in this country have chosen to align themselves with a kind of populism that is so distasteful, that is imbued with so much hate. And I do not do this well, and I do not do this consistently, but I feel that we're called to be very disciplined in the way that we react to this moment, to not give the worst forces the excuse to inflict tremendous suffering, and simultaneously to not simply play defense, to not pretend that we have a home in the Democratic Party, but that but to own our own sense of positive populism, a populism that appeals to the best in people rather than the worst in them. So I'm going to share a few slides, see if this works. Let's see here. Let's try that. So I may have to move through some of the slides pretty quickly once they get going, because I want to get through a few concepts. One, I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to Backbone campaign. I've got the pinwheel of death over here. Are you still hearing me?
We're hearing you, but we're not seeing your slides, Bill. Oh,
yeah.
Here they come. Here they come.
Starting now.
Are they? Okay, great.
Can't see them yet.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the share and see if I could do that over again. But here. Let's see, try this one more time. And if we don't get it, we're going to turn some stuff off and
It's like you're changing your background, Bill. I can't see slides, but
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's not really working out exactly what we were hoping for, huh? So it's all right. Well, let's skip it. I apologize for that. It's my fault for living in the woods, I guess. Here, so one of the things that I've been inspired by through the 21 years of leading Backbone campaign and our Artful Activism is ideas from grand strategy and the concepts of that I learned from my mentor, Chuck Spinney, who is actually a former
Oh
did
no,
we
it seems
lose
like we
Bill?
lost Bill.
Maybe
I'm
he'll
sure
come
he'll
back.
be. Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back with us in a minute. We could skip ahead. I know we had plans to do a little online action for people. We could do that now while we try and get Bill back
That's a great idea.
from out in the woods. Actually, Paul, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you up on the screen and ask you to unmute yourself because I know this is an issue that you've been working on a lot lately, and that's the recent threat of escalation in the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which we feel is a very dangerous threat to people, and we want to remind all of our members of Congress to be speaking out against any illegal and unauthorized escalation in the war. So if you can talk about the importance of that for a brief minute while I just get this link for the online action up, so you can tell people why this is important.
Sure, I see that Bill is back.
Okay.
It might be good to grab him while we can.
Okay. Bill, hey.
Are you there, Bill?
I am here. I'm hoping that you are seeing me.
No.
And that it's going to not knock me off again. So I apologize for that.
Bill, get rid of your screen share. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
We see you now.
All right. So friends, my apologies for that. So Backbone campaign started by a group of artful activists, folks who were puppet builders, sculptors, musicians. I'm a musician. And we started by doing giant banners over freeways and puppets for demonstrations. We participated in the resistance attempt to stop the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And our roots are in the peace movement. But one of the things that I learned early on was a concept, a framework about grand strategy. And it actually comes from the Pentagon and a part of a corner office that was actually trying to oppose the military-industrial congressional complex. I was very curious about this. Dennis Kucinich had been referring to this guy, Chuck Spinney. And so I had Dennis Kucinich and Chuck Spinney talk about the military-industrial congressional complex and what we could do about it. And in that, I followed up with that to learn more about grand strategy. So I'd like to go over a few things of grand strategy. And one is the concept of domains of conflict. In domains of conflict, there are three domains of conflict. One is attrition conflict, where we fight power, brute force against brute force. And that's whether that brute force be physical force or money. That is a type of conflict that we as social movement, specifically nonviolent social movement, cannot win in, nor would we choose, nor is it aligned with our values. The other is called maneuver conflict. And maneuver conflict, you can relate it to sort of like what we think of as guerrilla warfare or very sophisticated tactics where we do blockades or taking over buildings. So there's an element of surprise to it, where we are coming in, we're delivering our message, we're earning media attention, and then we are sort of, in a sense, disappearing back into the jungle. That is a useful form of engagement. But the fundamental work that we do is in the world of moral conflict, and in that we're in a type of paradigm battle, and our power is our power to create alliances. The main principles of grand strategy, there are three aspects: expand alliances, and in that we have expand alliances, increase cohesion amongst allies, and deepen the resolve of our people. Make sure that the things that we're engaged in, the tactics and campaigns that we're engaged in, appeal to the deepest aspirations and values so that we keep people engaged. One thing that I saw over the last decade is how the progressive movement had a way of self-destructing, how it created unsafe spaces for engagement. And so people were not able to enter and learn and come together and grow together. It became more of a competition around who could say all the right words in the right order, rather than how we could build community and trust in a learning and powerful movement. And that was really problematic. And I blame that for partially deconstructing a lot of the progress we made over in the 10 years preceding that. The second aspect of grand strategy is to do the opposite to our opponent. So if our opponent is the military-industrial complex, or its corporate power, or it's that it's to undermine its alliances. So right now, I would say that the negative populism of Trumpism has aligned itself with corporate power. And that part of our job as progressives, as social change agents, is to unravel that, to undermine the alliances of our opponent, to instill doubt in the people who are participating in that alliance of negative populism that is also serving to continue to enrich the billionaires while keeping the people divided and government failing to serve public interests. So there's expand alliances and those components. There's undermine the alliances of our opponent. And the third principle of grand strategy is to win without sowing the seeds of future conflict. That's something I've really started to take seriously over the last decade, is how do we lead with vision? Another set of ideas I like to leave you with is the ideas is this the sense that tactics are the things we do. Strategies are a series of tactics to achieve goals, but goals are stepping stones towards a vision. So tactics are supposed to serve strategies, strategies serve goals, and goals serve vision. So if we want to act in a strategic way, we need to be articulating our vision for the future. I think this is important, particularly now, because we have to have a vision for change that we're offering the people who feel aggrieved, some of it legitimate and some of it illegitimate, but to appeal to the legitimate grievances of those who've been left behind by neoliberal capitalism and how we've abandoned rural places, how we've that we've financialized our farm agriculture and to be agribusiness. We've made it impossible for small manufacturers to do business here in the United States successfully and compete with the transnational corporations. And how money and politics has corrupted our political system, so that there's not actual representation going on in our so-called democratic republic. So what I hit a crossroads in about 2013. We were fighting the fossil fuel companies that wanted to do turn the Pacific Northwest, a place that I deeply love, into a fossil fuel corridor to China. And I challenged a railroad worker who was on a panel with Peabody Coal and BNSF Railroad. And I said, is this really the best we can do with our railroads, is ship coal to power factories in China so that the factories that we've already shipped over there so we can import their stuff and simultaneously acidify the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. And this guy said, well, if it was, I don't trust these people as far as I can kick them. And if it was up to me, we'd nationalize the railroads. So I thought, this is an important person to connect with. A few months later, I was talking to this guy, Mike Elliott, and he said he offered me a paper that he had been involved in 2008 about modernizing the Northern Transcon. Now, I didn't even know what the Northern Transcon was. It turns out that that's the rail corridor from Chicago to the Pacific Northwest. So he said, why don't you and your people see if you can green this? So that was the beginning of a journey, because I knew that here I was in an opportunity to build social movement with someone who's on part of the alliance of my opponent and bring them over and bring them into to be part of an ally of ours. So in 2016, we published a book called Solutionary Rail, and I became increasingly interested in how railroads have this unique capacity to connect many different parts of society, from farmers and rural communities that have been left behind, that are no longer served by trains, either for shipping goods, for shipping their crops sometimes, or for moving people, to urban communities that are polluted by these diesel spewing locomotives and the rail yards that are serving giant ports that are facilitating the globalized economy, to tribes that are looking for ways to build out renewable energy, but they can't get it into the grid. So railroads offer opportunities not just to connect and move people, but to move stuff. And the railroads were created as the very first public-private partnership in order to do that. And they had common carrier obligations to serve every community and to not discriminate. But through a series of events, the building of the highway system, et cetera, railroads began to fail. The railroads were privately owned. They were then deregulated. And all of a sudden, we lost 70,000 miles of rail and lots of service. Amtrak was the first bailout of the railroads, and it relieved them of the obligation to serve passengers. And at the same time, it abolished like 250 trains on the first day. The deregulated railroads have become this engine where Wall Street extracts value out of this infrastructure that's been developed over 150 years. And whereas the corporate railroads, are unaccountable to actually serving the communities or the country. Those corridors are unique in that they are potentially the transmission corridors for renewable energy, creating a national supergrid. They're potentially electrified rail, and they're potentially expanded to increase passenger service and to return shipping and service to rural and all communities for shipping goods. So in terms of what I think is one progressive vision for the future is to empower a resilient, localized economy where people have meaningful work and participate in industry that is not globalized and financialized, but is part of a more resilient and sustainable society. I believe that society requires an infrastructure to support it. And the infrastructure of rail, the steel on steel, is tremendously more efficient for moving things than rubber tires on pavement. And the impact on society is the external costs of moving, for instance, for moving freight on freeways versus on rails is an 8-to-1 ratio. And that's not just climate, that's actually wear and tear on roads and vehicle accidents and congestion and other pollution. So I think that this particular moment, that one of our options is to play offense, not just to play defense, not just to be a resistance against the Trump administration, but to go after the populism and to try to claw back populist fervor, the desire for something, for meaningful lives and a sense of place and community, and to claw that back. And I think that railroads and offer an opportunity to have conversations between people who would otherwise be quite difficult to initiate a conversation with. And so Solutionary Rail is really taking that seriously. And I've already begun to sort of reach into even MAGA type circles, but to try to find that common cause with rural places and other unlikely allies, so that we can be, because we're not going to become allies. We're not going to build cohesion. We're not going to build power together unless we can actually communicate. And I think that I feel a moral obligation to resist an accelerationist tendency to tear it all down, and all the suffering that would bring, that exists on both the left and the right. And to instead try to build relationship and try to build a common, shared, and positive vision, so that we can start to use our tactics to instill a sense of doubt, to question the bill of goods that folks have been sold in Trumpism, and draw them to a different movement with a different vision. All right, I'd like to stop there. I apologize for all the technical problems. I hope this is useful and we can have a constructive conversation.
Okay, that's great, Bill. Thanks. And we were just about, when you came back online, ready to do our action through mass peace action. And so let's do that. And then we'll come back and we'll have a Q&A exchange with Bill. So over to Brian.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Ken. I'm going to bring Paul up on the screen too, because he's been working a lot on the subject of this action that we're about to put up. And that is the very worrying and very dangerous recent escalation in the war in Ukraine. As many of you probably know from watching the news, the Biden administration has authorized the use of long-range missiles inside of Russia. Paul, I'll let you get in here because you've been working a lot on this.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'm just going to build quickly on what you said. I mean, just think, folks, that there's never been a time in all of the frightening Cold War that many of us have lived through in which one superpower has actually fired weapons directly into another superpower. And that's the, these long-range missiles that President Biden has now authorized can only be fired with the assistance of U.S. military personnel. And in response to those missiles being fired into Russia now, so far just into, less than 100 miles from the border, but they can be expanded. And given the trajectory of this war, of someone coming up with an idea of providing Ukraine with a more sophisticated weapon, and first they say no, and then in another month they change their mind. So we are on an escalatory trip right now, because as you probably know, that Russia has said that this is a red line, firing U.S. personnel firing missiles into Russia, and that they will respond at appropriate targets. So far, those targets have not been outside of Ukraine. As usual, the people in Ukraine absorb the horror of this this totally unnecessary war that has taken place because of refusal, primarily from the West, to engage in negotiations, and with the insistence that the war must be used to weaken Russia. Anyway, there's a lot of disagreements about the background of the war, about what should be done, but we're hoping that at this period of time, when the war is escalating, I mean, this calls from the German foreign minister to invoke Section 5 of the NATO alliance because of cyber attacks and stuff like this that Russia is being accused of doing in Europe. So this would not be a physical attack by Russia, but it's just looking for any reason whatsoever to get NATO much more directly involved in this. And the more that happens, the more dangerous the situation becomes. There are talks about sending 100,000 NATO troops into Western Ukraine. There's all kinds of bizarre ideas out there, all of which seemed bizarre at the time until they happened. And that's where we're at right now. Russia is retaliating, but so far within Ukraine itself. We're hoping that whatever our beliefs about the Ukraine war and its causes, we are all united in the fact that this war must end, that the escalation going on must be stopped now, that the United States must withdraw the authority of Ukraine to fire these weapons into Russia, and instead move this conflict to negotiations. This is the only way to stop the escalation going on, which is to move the conflict from the military field into negotiations to get those started. So with that said, again, I realize we have many different opinions on the Ukraine war, but I think we can all agree that we must not let this war turn into a nuclear war, which will completely destroy this planet. It would start with tactical nuclear weapons, but it always, in all the war games they have, it always evolves into all-out nuclear war. This is our primary goal right now in our campaigns at Mass Peace Action, to prevent that from happening and to move this conflict onto the field of negotiations. So Brian, do you want to explain this urgent action alert that we're asking people to fill in?
Sure, I just put it in the chat. If you click on that, you can put in your address. It automatically, if you live here in the United States, looks up your members of Congress, both of your senators and your representative in the House of Representatives. And it pulls up a letter talking about this issue that Paul was just describing, this escalation that requires the participation of US and NATO forces that have not been authorized by Congress in contravention of the US Constitution. But that letter allows you to personalize it. As Paul said, we know that there are a lot of different feelings about this war, about its causes, about who's to blame. What we're hoping that everyone can agree on is that the killing and the death and the threat to all people that would happen if nuclear war breaks out is something that needs to stop immediately. And the way to do that is through a ceasefire and negotiations. That letter that it draws up allows you to personalize it. So you can put your own views in there, express yourself. We encourage you to do so. We believe that advocacy, that making a demand of our representatives is the only chance that we have at getting them to change this policy and take us back from the brink of nuclear war.
So hopefully people will quickly fill that in right now so we can get back to questions for Bill.
All right, are we ready to move on here, you think?
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Brian. And we're going to do questions and answers. I'm actually going to, something's occurring to me as Brian and Paul talk about nuclear war, which I know is at the top of my head too, and so many of us as we look at not just Ukraine, but also the Middle East. Before I ask my question, let me remind people that the way we do this question and answer is if you go to your reaction button on your software here on your Zoom meeting, and you can raise your hand, virtually raise your hand. So we do that. We ask people to click on that button and raise your hand, and then I call on you and ask you to ask Bill a question and get him to elaborate on something you have in mind. So as people queue up to do that, Bill, what you're talking about and sort of your vision for engaging to bring allies in, especially those who may not have been allies already. Solutionary Rail, I'm sorry you weren't able to get your slides up. People, if you go to the website, I put the link in there, Solutionary Rail, you will see more flesh about what Bill is talking about. You can also go to Backbone Campaign, but he's working on Solutionary Rail as sort of a response to the situation we're in terms of, climate change and all that comes with it, wars and poverty and disenfranchisement. So here's what I'm thinking, Bill, is that we're looking at an urgent situation in world affairs right now, and maybe I'm sure you feel it. Most of us feel it, and it feels like something's got to be done quickly. And that's sort of, what Brian and Paul were conveying too. Let's stop this war in Ukraine. But if I perceive correctly, the Solutionary Rail and the vision you're thinking about are more long-term. It will take a while to make that work. Maybe I'm not seeing it correctly. So my question to you is, how do you get both? Immediate in motion and something long-term in motion, like a good rail system?
Well, I actually think that there's a lot of movement right now in rail and in with the tariffs and such of bringing reshoring manufacturing. So there's a specific body called the Surface Transportation Board that regulates railroads that I actually have been spending a lot of time trying to get the fifth person assigned there, because I really think we need to claw back this critical national infrastructure from Wall Street and force it to serve the public interest. I don't think we're going to get a lot of the changes we want in that unless we're able to make progress in doing that. And sometimes that means short-term things might be working to restore passenger service to rural places or to support the short line railroads. I know that doesn't sound very sexy, but I think that it's an important element of it. I wanted to find another example for you of something else that I think we could be working on as that's a de-escalatory idea in terms of the global situation, and that is it has been for like 100 years the idea of bridging the North American continent with Asia. And there's a movie out about these two guys who've recently passed, but called The Straight Guys. And they wanted to build a rail tunnel across the Bering Strait. And Russia and China had enthusiasm for it, and others have had enthusiasm for it in the past. I'm especially interested in this idea that the sun is always shining. And so if you had a really efficient transmission across the Bering Strait, we'd all of a sudden be able to stabilize the variability of renewable energy across all the continents, because really the sun never gets turned off. It's always there. But the limitation to building out renewable energy is the variability of that. So that's why the importance of the grid aspect of our work and the Solutionary Rail proposal. But I think that there's a potential international aspect of it too, and that I would much prefer to be engaging China and Russia in that way, in a collaborative and in some sort of collaborative, bold collaborative project, than in a project that's merely about enmity. I mean, I find it very irritating to hear people complain about China when it was the American corporations who wanted to, and Wall Street, they wanted to go over there and get just higher profits and lower wages and weaker environmental standards. So I think we could offer a new way forward, and there might even be possibilities and openness in a Trump administration to an idea like that.
All right, that's great. I see 4 hands raised. So let's go one at a time. And let me remind everyone that if you have a comment, that's fine. Please just keep it short and pitch it back to Bill. Ask him a question and that he can respond to. So Michael Hoey, I guess it is, you're first. Go right ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it took me a minute to unmute. I always click the unmute and then it goes through a cycle and slows me down. So
No problem.
first of all, there's a map that I really like. I follow rail a lot in Europe. I follow what the Czechs are doing and the Austrians and Germans and all that. And so there's this rail site, it's OPEN railwaymap.org.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because you click on it, it gives you the railroads everywhere in the world on one page, and then you zoom it in, and then you can get to where you can see your house anywhere in the world, see anyone's houses. So it's got those features where you can, either have it super zoomed in to see your house or super zoomed out and see the whole world with railroads. So, but I do have a question. I just wanted to be sure you knew about that resource. On
Yeah.
the thing you were trying to do through the northern corridor, Washington and Montana and all that to Chicago, what happened with that? Did they pick it up, or did they just kind of let you do what you were doing and then kind of say, okay, thanks, we'll see you later?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I actually, and I'll put a link in the chat that goes into more detail, but Burlington Northern Santa Fe and Berkshire Hathaway, the owner of that, they basically, Warren Buffett, the benevolent billionaire, basically has ignored it and actually fought us around electrification. The railroads, these corporations, they don't want any kind of strings attached in any sort of public-private partnership where they have to actually owe the public anything. And in fact, they really would prefer, I liken them to the using the Jedi mind trick of "we're not the droids you're looking for" from the first Star Wars movie, but they're exactly the droids we're looking for. But they don't want us to pay attention because it's so obvious that this is critical national infrastructure and should be serving our society in so many other ways. So they basically have fought and fought and fought us. and fought California's effort to push for electrification of rail via the California Air Resources Board. But the University of Texas Austin just did a study talking about rail electrification and how the return on capital and how it could pay off. And it's my experience has been a constant learning curve. They rejected it, but I think that the railroads are becoming subject to a lot more complaint, and that there's a growing movement of shippers, passengers, railroad labor, environmentalists, and other transmission advocates, et cetera, who want more from this infrastructure. And BNSF would be the perfect partner. Berkshire Hathaway would be the perfect partner to do a transition where the public relieve them of the duty of managing the infrastructure, take it over, use it for transmission, electrify it, and have them pay tolls like a toll road for trains and get free power the more they use it, so that we can get trucks off the roads. But no, they haven't bent over backwards to help us. They've bent over backwards to resist this movement. But it's growing, and I think it'll be. They won't continue to resist for much longer. I think there was a resistance between the steam to diesel transition, but there are similar sorts of benefits in the switch from diesel electric locomotives to electric, and I think there's an element of inevitability to it. One of my slides is of all of the rest of the world doing it, and they're not doing it because of regulations. They're doing it because it's just a smarter way to run trains.
Good, Bill. Hey, Bill, if you want to send me your slides by email as PDFs or however you want to do it as a link, I always, and everyone else, I always send out follow-up emails to our webinars. And if you like, I can send either your slideshow or a link or whatever you'd like to share. I can put it in the email that goes out. And it not only goes out to the people who are watching this, but to our entire mailing list. So if that's something you want to share, send it to me.
Yeah, for sure. I will share the especially the rail in the public interest slide show, and I'll actually put it in the chat right now so that people can check it out. All right.
Yeah. All right. So our next person is Moji Aga. Sorry, Moji. Go ahead, okay. Moji.
This is Moji Aga, short for Mushtaba Agha Mohammadi. Hello. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. And thank you for your wonderful presentation. I wanted to seek your feedback regarding, you mentioned positive populism versus negative populism. In my classes, as well as in my activism sessions or whatever's, learning from what I've experienced inside Iran, I am making a distinction between ideological populism versus democratic populism.
Mm-hmm.
Ideological populism is imposed from above by people who want to force the society into the paradise of their own ideology. And this ideology may be a Wall Street ideology or a Marxist-Leninist ideology, a Zionist ideology, an Islamic ideology. Regardless of what its form, it is imposed from above, and it socially engineers the society from above through massive manipulation, incredible brainwashing, and also by force, by implied or applied force, versus democratic populism, whereby it doesn't have an ideology beforehand, and because it is democratic in nature, it is from the grassroots, and it translates the needs of the people into simple language so that regular people can understand. And one example is Bernie Sanders, where he talks about the 1% versus the 99%. Another
Yeah.
example is Dr. Mossadegh of Iran, who was overthrown by the CIA in 1953, where he used democratic populist methods in order to bring in a simple language the complex pains of the society into the consciousness of the people. And so my suggestion is to and I'd like to know what you think about this distinction: democratic populism versus ideological populism. The old form of populism distinction was positive populism of the Marxist-Leninist versus the negative populism of the capitalists. So in this case, ideological populism, well, that was just one example, by the way.
Yeah.
So ideological populism versus democratic populism.
Well, Moji, thank you so much. I really think that's really interesting, and I would like to explore that some more. I'm not sure that we're completely without a ideology if a belief in things like human rights, et cetera, could be formulated as an ideology. So I'm not sure that how to square that exactly. I do feel like when I've in the past talked about paradigm battles and the battle of paradigms, and I've talked about rights frameworks, I've thought about the difference between the sort of rights of capital, the rights of the property rights, et cetera, versus like human rights, rights of nature, rights of communities. And so, I'm continually inspired by, without romanticizing indigenous culture, I think, I don't think that that's helpful, but I do think that that sense of place and sense of the sacred, things that are beyond price, is actually something more than just sort of materialism in a Marxist sense, and so but I don't know that it's not actually a belief system. Whether that qualifies as ideology or not, I'm not sure. But when I guess my simple way, I feel like when I appeal to the best in people, that appeal to them through what they love and their connection to others and their connection to place and their accountability to each other and our accountability to our history and our responsibility to future generations and honoring the sacrifices of past generations. To me, that's about appealing to the best in people. And that, to me, is how I think of positive populism. Whereas negative populism, I would appeal to just merely anger and grievance, xenophobia, othering. I think that one of our challenges is that we need to be able to continually humanize each other, even in the efforts to dehumanize, and the divide and conquer of those who benefit from us being divided. That we have to counter that in a very disciplined way. So I'm very open to having a flexibility around language and how we speak to that. But fundamentally, I think that it comes to having some things that are beyond price, and that it's about humanization and relationship, because I believe fundamentally social movement is relational, and that we only build true alliances and solidarity and actually only true power through building relationship. And so whether that's relationship to our community or relationship to our allies, et cetera, I think I could stop talking, and you already got it 5 minutes ago.
Thank you, Moji. And that was a great exchange. I appreciate all the thinking that came from both of you. That was great. Let's see, who else do we have here? We have Brian Winters. Go ahead, Brian, unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I was really intrigued by the title Positive Populism. And I do think that is our path forward, to identify the different strands of populism and weave them together in a coherent picture and a coherent strategy. And I like your grand strategy. But populism itself, as you probably know, the word populist was coined specifically for the People's Party, founded in 1891. And as I'm sure you know, nationalizing the railroads was one of their planks. But along with a whole other slew of issues, because there were so many economic concerns that were hurting people during the first Gilded Age. And there are a lot of things that are hurting people today too. And I don't think that railroads is something that people were sitting around discussing at the kitchen table before when it came time to decide how to vote. There's a lot more economic issues that people are concerned about. You may have read it, some of the other viewers. Thomas Frank wrote a book called The People Know, A Brief History of Anti-Populism, and it's a really good read. And he summed up populism as the idea of working people coming together, and populist uprisings always have the same enemies: monopolies, banks, and corruption. And so to positive populism, we got to focus on bringing people together around those three things. Could you talk about how to have a broader vision?
No, I certainly don't disagree with you, Brian. I think that we do need to find those areas of commonality that allow us to engage in constructive conversations and build relationships with people. I feel like the Obama administration missed a huge opportunity around housing with the housing crisis and in the privatization or the republicization. Instead of using Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and creating a national housing cooperative where people were building equity in something, we decided to turn it over to Wall Street and make it another traded commodity. So taking on the banks, we've heard a lot of people talk lately about the resentment that there was no accountability for the banks and failing everybody. They actually got wrapped into the Obama administration, and there was no accountability for Cheney and Bush after the Iraq for lying us into the most disastrous foreign policy adventure in our history potentially. So I get it. I just think that I find that railroads are an interesting, unique subject matter that actually does tie very directly to how we connect to each other and whether we connect to each other. That there is momentum for restoring rail service between places, passenger rail service. And in this idea of reshoring or localized economies, having alternatives to trucking by making sure that these railroads that were built on land that was stolen from the Indians and given to the railroad companies is an important part of this. And it's something that is not, it's not a divisive, it's not a triggering topic, whereas so much else can be. And I think you're right. I think we can shout and yell and scream about the insurance companies and the bankers and corruption and too. But I do think we need, if we want a positive, localized, resilient, more democratic society, sustainable society, we're going to need a transportation infrastructure for that society. We're going to need a transmission infrastructure for that society. And instead of mining the shit out of all these other places and shifting our resource extraction and our resource wars from one type of extractive resource to another type, from oil to lithium, I think, or cobalt or whatever, I think we could do much better and reduce our need for batteries by increasing investment in transmission, using existing rights of way to speed that transition, and And that all relates to putting the rail corridors and the railroads back in service to communities. And I think it's just such an easy solution hiding in plain sight that I think would be unstrategic not to use it. And honestly, I'm obviously just obsessed.
Another great answer. You collect a lot of dots, Bill, and thanks for doing that. Okay, Melody Shank, over to you.
Yeah, Bill, I was wondering if you could maybe connect your solutionary thinking to the struggle that was the foundation of the creation of WERN Network, which is local groups who are struggling to try to even educate people about the military industrial complex, and specifically to the plants that are in their communities. I know that here in Asheville, when we started Reject Raytheon against an RTX Pratt and Whitney plant that was being built here, we tried to make the argument that what the jobs that they were going to bring, which was the card that was being dealt to everybody, about its positiveness for the economy here. I think we knew that there were alliances that needed to be made, but I guess I'm wondering about that solutionary thinking and how it applies to that struggle to try to help people understand the bigger picture of that economy that military industrial complex brings, and also about the conversion away from that, which we also have had webinars about that in the past in WERN. So, either or both of those. Any ideas?
Well, Melody, you bring up a lot of ideas, actually. First of all, I always try to refer to it as the military industrial congressional complex. I learned that from Chuck Spinney, also my strategy mentor, because we want to speak clearly about how this power is maintained. And it goes right to what you were saying about it's going to bring jobs. The other thing that I think is a challenge for the peace movement, I count myself as part of the peace movement, is that we're often using tactics in service of a vision, tactics for world peace, a march for peace, but we don't necessarily have it's not always well articulated, and I certainly don't think I could articulate the pathway from where we are to where we want to be, and what is the strategies for achieving goals that are moving us towards world peace. So I would say, and that's pretty important, because if we have tactics but we don't have goals, that means we can't really have a strategy to reach goals, so we can't actually reach our vision. I think that's kind of problematic. The other thing that I find instructive in the world of community organizers, they talk about building from the power you have to the power you need. So if you think about what is the power we need to dismantle this military-industrial congressional complex, I'm sure we could spend weeks working on that one, but we'd have to be able to address the corrupting influence of both the information we get and the manipulation that we're enrolled into the military-industrial complex, and our people are enrolled into it. So we're not. I know that it only takes, never underestimate the power of a small group of people, to change the world. And I believe that, but I also think that to shift major systems, we need to build power way beyond the size of that we have achieved in our peace movement or in our progressive movement. And so I don't think that's a great answer to your question, but one thing, the last thing I'll end with is that I've been struck by hearing my cousins who voted for Trump and others talking about how it's going to bring peace. So here are these people And I have a hard time believing it, right? It kind of pisses me off because, I remember arguing with them. I went to jail first in regards to stopping the CIA, mining harbors in Nicaragua. And so that was, Reagan administration, and they were all in for Reagan. And then they were, so then in the Bush Cheney, I didn't feel like that my cousins or any of these people were like standing up, yelling and screaming about the lies that were, sending them into these forever wars. So I have a hard time buying it, but I'm like, I want to hold on to that thread of giving people the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, you want world peace. How do we get to world peace? Well, maybe we should decolonize. I think of decolonizing sometimes also of decolonizing imagination. Diane de Prima has a great stanza in one of her poems, says, the only war that matters is the war against the imagination. She says it 3 times. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. The only war that matters is the war against the imagination. All other wars are subsumed in it. So somehow we have to claw back territory that is imaginative territory, which is our capacity to see and envision a future together that is different from the manipulated, sold, propagandized vision for the future that fills our time and our consciousness constantly, that gives us identity through party affiliation rather than community. And so that's my best. Oh, you're
muted.
Thank you. And thank you, Bill and Melody. I see one more hand up, and then I have maybe a final question for you as well, Bill. So Jeffrey Bardell, yourself, and go ahead and ask a question.
I have 4. How many can I ask? To be honest,
Let's try one.
Let's see.
You can make a comment, but
How fast can you ask him, Jeffrey?
Well, there is an ally we can actually get involved that can actually help us in our cause. They're called the patriotic millionaires. They're millionaires that actually fight for the people, and not for themselves. After all, I actually got in touch with one of the president herself, and I'm hoping maybe this idea can actually help out with the guys' cause. Maybe fundraising the grassroots movements, and maybe fundraising politicians that actually support the people, like Bernie Sanders, and maybe even running for office themselves. So they can just goes to show that not every billionaire is a selfish, pardon the expression, a selfish pig, or should I say selfish big fat pig, if you know what I mean. Plus, you said Trump, and I don't. You haven't forgot about Project 2025, have you?
No, haven't. Yeah.
We need to keep reminding the people of that, because even if Trump does achieve peace, we won't have peace in the United States if he turns America into an autocracy, or uses it to try to make himself president for life. If you know what I mean.
How about a question, Jeffrey?
What?
How about a question for Bill? Something
But
he can respond to.
Okay.
I don't understand all this talk of railroads and all this stuff. What's it got to relate to the Zoom meeting?
It's a strategy that I'm engaged in and working on to build infrastructure that and to build relationships and alliances. First, I'd like to, Jeffrey, address your first point. And what it raises for me is, yes, of course, there's the patriotic millionaires, et cetera, and other wealthy people who are support progressive social causes and other things. So one idea that I had years ago was that we should be investing in non-transactional organizing, meaning organizing that is about listening to people and trying to understand what the community wants and facilitate community dialogue. And I thought of it as like people have probably participated or heard of community-supported agriculture. So you go and you support a farmer, you get your basket of food each week. I think we should have community-supported organizers. And I think that they should be able to be trained as change agents in creative campaigning, in direct community organizing, in facilitating, in a variety of types of skill sets that are suited for that you need to engage in making change. So I would say if we could really tap into those patriotic millionaires in this way, I would say we would be creating a new cadre. Cadre is probably the wrong word, but a core of community-based organizers who are facilitating connection between people and trying to help people build power for the things that they want in their local community, and be networked across the country. I'm not sure if and I think that would actually build leadership that would potentially emerge as the kind of grassroots democracy that you, I think, are referring to and was referred to earlier.
Okay, I have one more person. Jeffrey, if you want to make okay. I was going to let you make one more quick comment. I see you wanted to make another comment, but please keep it brief, Jeffrey.
I will. It's a follow-up to what he said to Brian.
Go ahead.
Do you guys want? I got three members of their contact, including the presidents. Do you want them?
Sure.
Oh, all righty. Give me a minute or two, and I'll just share them. Who else needs them?
There's a lot of people. There are 54 people here, Jeffrey. So I think if you want to put stuff in the chat, you could do that. But
I think only specific people, because
okay.
I don't want to share with everyone. Then I might get suspicious.
So Bill has his email in the chat. You can send him an email.
I have my email in there. That would be fine. So I want to point out one other thing, and I think this is important for how do we use tactics to claw back and create a sense of buyer's remorse for people who've been drawn into the Trumpism. And there's a concept that comes out of grand strategy called motherhood and mismatch. It's that we want our cause to be the moral equivalence of motherhood. Now, if you have a bad memory, whatever, with mother, try an unassailable good, so that anybody who attacks you looks like a jerk. So that's where I think that things like some of my slides had images of like, who would Jesus deport? Thou shalt not commit genocide. Whatever. Try to and bodily autonomy. What is the government doing in your bedroom? So there's the motherhood part. You standing, protecting what you love, etc. But then the mismatch is about a triangle, an idea that there are opportunities for the vulnerability of our opponent is the mismatch between what they say they're doing and what they're actually doing. What they say is real and people's experience of reality, and who they say they are and who they actually are. So when we're going to see a lot of corruption, as it's not like any administration is free from that, but we're going to see a lot of corruption. And I think attacking the mismatch between the kind of change people are hoping for versus what they're actually going to get is an opportunity. And I can't remember what it was. The Project 2025 stuff that you mentioned, Jeffrey, is what brought that to mind. And so they called the mismatch triangle, and it's in the in my presentation that I linked to that on the web page around grand strategy and theory of change.
All right, great. Well, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm not gonna ask the question I had in mind, but I know that Paul Shannon has a question for you. So let's end on that one. So Paul, if you have your question, why don't you bring it on?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I'm going back to some of the initial comments you made, Bill, about the need to expand alliances versus an approach to accomplishing our goals that, we try to bring one power against another and see who wins. To me, this relates a lot. If we survive and kind of hopefully bypass this danger of nuclear war right now, and we actually get to the Trump administration, I think some basic decisions have to be made among people who want to change the world about how to relate to the phenomenon we're about to engage. What I see happening is a decision that we will fight them to the death. Your approach, as I understand it, would be different from that, of somehow finding a way to invite, to come together with elements of the Trump coalition that doesn't see us as fighting them all the time. Because right now, given the balance of forces, I don't think we're going to do very well in that fight. And yet right. I see our approach to the Trump administration, who I'm terrified of, as being going after them, stopping them at every turn, resisting absolutely everything. And I'm afraid that will put us into the same basket that the Trump coalition puts the Democrats. And I don't think that's a good basket to be in. I don't think it's worked well for us over the past 3 administrations. And I think it isolates us from people who we absolutely have to connect up with if we have any chance of succeeding. So I'd just like to get your impressions about a general orientation that we maybe should develop toward dealing with this new reality we're going to be facing, hopefully facing on January 20th.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate that, Paul. It's one of the things that I think it is important to remember that political parties are not inherently based on values. They're based on power. And that and so keeping people divided and shifting power from one to the other political party is in somebody's interest, but it's not in our interest. So having an affiliation and identity that's based in being a part of the Democratic Party, I think is a mistake. And we don't get anywhere by attacking people, but with broad statements that they're all just stupid racists. We know better. They're all just stupid racists. Who responds to a conversation is open when when the first thing you tell them is they're a stupid racist? Now, I'm not saying that I transcend that every time. Like I struggle with that with my own family, but So I do think that we have to we have to move our identity out of the realm, if to the extent that it's trying to be captured by a particular party, move it out of the realm of party and into the realm of community or social movement or as change agents. And that I guess that's kind of why I am, utilizing Rail. I have found it to be a particularly useful tool for doing that. And I feel like I lost track of some aspects of your question, but I think when we do our tactics, it should, like even before Trump's first administration, I was out blockading I-395 in Washington D.C. To stop Trumpism, and that's not going to work this time. Somebody sent us an inflatable baby Trump, and we flew it up in the air, and we made paper mache heads of Donald Trump and put him in chains and shackles and chains. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work this time. We've got to find a way to authentically connect with people and find common cause, and maybe trust that they want change we can all believe in. And somehow we've got to figure out how to deliver it together. I don't know, Paul, if that even touched what you're trying to get at.
It does. It does. It's a big issue we're facing right now, and I don't know whether people see it as alternatives that we have, and that we really have to figure out the overall strategy we are going to take, because it's a very dangerous situation if we don't figure that out.
Yeah, well, I think that we do have, all of us have limited time, limited imaginative, energy, and somehow I think we have to be able to again, decolonize or infiltrate and take over imaginative territory, if you will. Like, what if our big campaign is, again, like this kind of people would call it crazy idea about the sun is always shining campaign, where we decide that we want a cooperative relationship with Russia and China, so that we're interdependent for energy, and we are going to build something together. If the more calories and moments of people's lives and of energy that gets put into building something together is less calories and moments in people's lives where we're figuring out how to destroy each other. So.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, and that is a pretty good place to stop, I think. What I was going to suggest, and my question to you, Bill, was to talk more about backbone, which you've been talking about solutionary rail. But I think I will just encourage people to go look at not just the Solutionary Rail website, but the Backbone Campaign website. And I will testify on your behalf that group of people, Bill and his partners, have helped me immensely to think about how to do activism here in Asheville. We use their giant banners on our bridge, and I make them myself all the time. They are strategies towards a bigger vision, and what I love is that, Bill, you have the strategies, and if people need to think that through, I would encourage people to get in touch with you through Backbone. But the vision that you have, using Rail as your touchstone and all the dots that it connects, is really positive. And in these times, maybe it addresses, Paul, some of your I don't know what to call it. I mean, if it were me, I'd call it my angst, my world weariness about what's happening right now. And I'm looking for hope all the time. And I find it in the people around me, and I'm looking for it in visionary stuff. And Bill, I think you've got a little handle on a hopeful vision that it isn't directly onto the thing that our War Industry Resistors Network is about, the war industry itself. But at the same time, it conveys a sort of, like you say, a sort of an imagination and a sense of an entry point into something that could lead to something else. And And I think that's really hopeful. And I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you do. I'm glad you came on with us to do this webinar. And, you know, all the best to you. And I encourage people to, you know, get in touch with Bill through Backbone. And if you want some assistance, he and his circle are pretty good at it. Any last words, Bill? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I want to echo that of course, people, I'd love for you to join our monthly calls with our Solutionary Rail Hive. So, you know, get on that or check out our Substack. It is Giving Tuesday. It was Giving Tuesday yesterday, right? Or what day is it today? Yeah. So we're fundraising for stuff, and we just committed to hiring a new Artful Activism coordinator. And so, you know, we rely on people's generosity in order to be generous with others. But we help people get set up with lights to do light projection onto buildings. We have a unique, we're the only ones in the country we've developed an LED letter that is small and on vinyl. It's shippable. It has battery packs with daisy chain. So you can have an entire banner of LED lights. So you don't need the one person per letter from the Overpass Light Brigade style. I mean, we've done that too. And we I have the banners that you use, Ken, that you use so beautifully, and we feature in our end of year letter your banner. Thou shalt not commit genocide. There you. I should have credited you earlier. These are really great tools because they're a good way to connect with people. They don't require a great deal of time. Folks, they're highly visible with very little or zero risk associated with them. So as we're building social movement and building connection with people, and we come up with a message that is appealing to people, it speaks something that's sort of unarticulated, but is churning in people. That'll happen. That constantly happens, right? So when we can put that out over an overpass and reach thousands of folks in just an hour during rush hour, or do a light projection, get photos that either go online or are in a place where other people are going to see, that kind of stuff is amplifies our ideas and helps move us into people's consciousness in a way. And it gives us opportunities to get earned media attention for the things we care about. And I think there's lots of opportunities. There are also the kinds of things that are, the messages can be changed. The message, you're not stuck with just one thing. You didn't, spend all night painting a banner and then the next day week have to paint another one. So, I do hope folks, take advantage of the 21 years of tactical development and innovating that we've done. I do think it's valuable, and I welcome further conversation and engagement. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I had technological problems. I'm finding that my little computer isn't really adequate for running a monitor and other things, and I think I'm going to have to invest in something better. So I apologize for that.
Worries. And thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Bill, for being with us. And we'll have something in January. We don't have it figured out yet, but we'll do something. Please come back and do our webinar with us in January. Until then, let's keep out there. Let's stay organized and stay working towards peace, everybody.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.